Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, Micah people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. August is in full swing. The same can be said about the latest podcast as I get set to launch another hour of sports talk to keep you entertained and informed, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And we had another wild and crazy weekend in Major League Baseball, and that's not even including what happened there Thursday night at the deadline, which I'm not going to fully unpack. If you prefer to really get everything about what took place there on Thursday, and again, it's already been 3-4 days, but you could go back to the channel here on YouTube to get an extensive overview of everything that transpired, not only that afternoon, but right up until and past the deadline, as I did a live Major League Baseball trade deadline recap. So you're going to get everything right from you-know-who, yours truly, as it was happening. So if you want to go back and recap that or get your own recap of that, please do so. There are a couple of deals that I want to discuss in light of what took place there that afternoon, which to me, I found very surprising. But I'll go about that at the back end of this segment, or really right after what transpired here over the weekend. And if you're watching on Spotify or even on YouTube, I'm rocking the Jose Fernandez Rest in Peace shirt, and I probably should have worn this on Thursday, considering the 31st of July would have been his 33rd birthday, and may he rest in peace. We all know what happened, the tragic boating accident there in 2016, mid to late September. And I guess it's apropos to even wear it today, considering what happened over the weekend, especially with the Marlins. But I'm going to start off with the Yankees, because that series was one that nobody saw coming. Now, we understand that the Marlins have played well. And one more time, I'm going to talk about them on the opposite side of this, because to me, front and center are the Yankees. And for those who think that the sky is falling in the Bronx, for those who think, the Yankee hater like myself, that the season is over, they've hit rock bottom, etc., nonsense. There's still plenty of games to be played. There's still literally, 50 some odd games to go in an American League, which is still up for grabs. It is wide open, and we know that the chase in the wild card is a lot more thicker than it is in the National League. So if I'm going to be one to think that the Yankees already have dug their grave and I'm ready to throw dirt on it, absolutely not. But I will say that I did not expect the events of what happened this weekend, in particular Friday nights, unfold. And that's where I'm going to start, because first and foremost, if you're Carlos Rodon, and I don't care what kind of Yankee fan you are, I don't care if every day is coconuts, palm trees, bright sunny skies, not a cloud to be found when it comes to the left-handed hurler who you brought on 2 years ago and has had his moments last year and this year made it onto the All-Star team. But there is a clear-cut case of a guy that you cannot 1,000% trust in any spot. Forget about a big spot a la Game 2 of the World Series last year. But when you see what happened there on Friday night, to where the Yankees jumped out to a 6-0 lead, where Giancarlo, coming back home again, hit a 3-run homer to get the scoring started, and then they jumped out to a 6-0 lead heading into the bottom of the 5th. And what happened? They gave up 4 runs, Rodon, and he didn't even make it out of the 5th inning to even try to secure himself a decision where he would have left at least on the winning side of this game. No, after 4 2/3, Aaron Boone had seen enough, and therefore that's where the bullpen tried to come in and clean the mess. And even with the Yankees having the Marlins to come back to make it 6-4, they actually extended the lead to 9-4 in the game before Kyle Stowers hits a grand slam to cut the deficit to 9-8. They actually tie the game and take the lead with 6 runs, I believe in the bottom of the 7th, to take a 10-9 lead. Then the Yankees tie the game on an Anthony Volpe home run, then take a 2-run lead to make it 12-10 heading into the bottom of the 9th. And despite the fact that with the bullpen, the David Bednars of the world, the Jake Birds of the world, who were awful in the game, by the way. Bednar, I believe, gave up the home run to Stowers, if I'm not mistaken, to tie the game or make it 9-8. And then you have a scenario where you get to 12-10. So the Yankees, who squandered 6-0 and 9-4 leads, and then happen to retake the lead there when you get to the ninth inning. And now you have Camilo Doval, another import from the trade deadline out of San Francisco. And you can't put it all on him, because another guy they traded for at the deadline, Jose Caballero, makes the error that certainly put the game just in a tizzy, to where the Marlins start to come back. Xavier Edwards gets that base hit where they had first and second, and you're thinking to yourself, all right, well, now it's 12-11. You're going to have a situation where it's going to be probably first and second at worst, or at best, maybe first and third at worst. But what happens is Caballero misplays the ball. It goes past them almost all the way to the wall. So the runner on first comes all the way around the score. The runner on second could have crawled in. So now what should have been a 12-11 game turns out to be a 12-12 game. And then the next batter hits a squibber right in front of the home plate. And Xavier Edwards comes storming through, sliding headfirst to secure the win. Marlins with 3 runs in the bottom of the ninth inning win the game 13-12, and Yankee fans may have been on the ledge at that point, because they had no business losing this game, despite the fact that they were trailing 10-9 heading into the top of the 8th inning. And like as I mentioned, with everybody that they brought in from the deadline, David Bednar, Jake Bird, Camilo Doval, not all his fault, but still, he was a part of it, and Jose Caballero, who had the biggest play of the game that era. And for the Yankees from that point on, it seemed like they didn't even recover. Because then on Saturday, all they had was 2 hits in the game and getting shut out by 2 solo home runs by Agustin Ramirez, and then the big-time base running blunder. And this is where, and I'm going to get to the question as far as who's to blame here with the Yankees. To me, when I saw this play happen where Paul Goldschmidt was up 1 out, I think it was top of the 4th, if I'm not mistaken, and he pops up a ball to second base where Jazz Chisholm was on first. And Chisholm, of course, is maybe a third of the way to second base. But for whatever the reason, after Xavier Edwards catches the ball, mind you, second base, throws it to first, and he gets Jazz Chisholm out for a double play. He should have been pulled from the game at that point. I don't care if it's Major League Baseball, college baseball, high school baseball, even Little League. There is no way on God's green earth do you get thrown out on a double play pop-up to second base. Chisholm should have been removed from the game, and maybe shouldn't even played yesterday for that matter. And if you're Aaron Boone, that would have made a statement. Because Jazz Chisholm, as we all know, good stick, has provided a little bit of oomph and personality to the team. And for him to just all of a sudden black out there and not get back to the bag in time. Now, would the Yankees have scored a run in that inning? Or who knows? Obviously, we'll never know. But that play right there is indicative of this Yankee season. And of the manager, for that matter. More on him in a bit. So the Yankees lose 2-0 there on Saturday. And then yesterday, Trent Grisham hits a home run to lead off the game. So you're thinking, all right. And I thought that the Yankees were going to salvage this game. You had Luis Hill finally getting on the mound after, more than 4 months. April, May, June, July. More than 4 months on the show with that lat strain. And I thought, not that he was going to pitch great, but I figured that he's going to be pumped up. First start of the year. Yankees are not going to leave town without getting a victory. And it kind of brought me back, unfortunately, to the 4th of July weekend when the Mets won those first 2 games at Citi Field and were unable to get the sweep. I felt that was going to be the case yesterday. But what happened? All of a sudden, the Marlins get 3 in the bottom of the 3rd, tack on 3 more runs. They make it 6-1. Kyle Stowers with another home run in the series. And next thing you know, the Yankees sleepwalk their way, despite the fact that Jazz Chisholm did have a 2-run homer there in the 7th. But then what happens? When the Yankees get a little bit of momentum, you figure 6-3. Bottom of the inning, what happens? They give up a run there, and obviously it gives the Marlins momentum. So they were unable to get a 0 to go to the top of the 8th and maybe get a couple of runners on base to get the tying run to the plate. That wasn't the case. Yankees go meekly to the airport and fly out of Miami to the Dallas-Fort Worth area on the heels of a 3-game sweep. And one more time. Is it the end of the world for the Yanks? Does this mean that they're not going to make it to the playoffs? Absolutely not. But as a Yankee fan, not that I am, you have to be sick to your stomach. There is no way that you should have left Miami without a win. Friday night in particular. And since then, you did not play well. Yes, you did have a lead there early yesterday, but after that, we're pretty much a no-show. And the Rangers, who have played well here, although despite the fact they did lose 3 out of 4 in Seattle, so they lost a couple of games there when it comes to the wild card. But Texas, now coming back home, you would think they don't have to face Jacob deGrom. He pitched yesterday. So you would think that the Yankees will have to fare better here, although they're not going to give you any reason to think that they could actually win a game or even a series for that matter, considering how the ebbs and flows of the last 6-7 weeks have been for this Yankee team. Now, who's to blame here? I could say the manager, and he's front and center here, because there is no way that with Chisholm getting doubled up the way he did, Austin Wells not remembering how many outs there were after Trent Grisham tried that drag bunt, and then Austin Wells was in no man's land. And yes, maybe we could fault the first base coach there to tell the runners, or even Chisholm in this case, considering this just happened a couple days ago, where the ball's in the air. Can he yell to Chisholm, hey, start getting back to first, start getting back? And maybe that happened, we don't know. Obviously, we're not on the field, and maybe it wasn't relayed, who knows? But we all know that the person that's going to be responsible for the behavior of these players and how they're able to play heads-up baseball is the manager. And I got news for you. He did sign an extension, and he was able to get to a point where he's getting away with it. But how much more is he going to be able to get away with it, even with an extension, to where he may not even have a job anymore? And I'm not trying to call for Aaron Boone's job here on August 4th, because there's still, like I said, plenty of season left to be played, and who knows, maybe they'll end up in the World Series again, just like they did last year. Although they're not going to face the Royals or Guardians in the playoffs the way they did with a cakewalk to a World Series. But I'm sorry, the manager is at fault. And yes, there are particular coaches and other players that aren't aligned here or are in tune with what's going on with the way that they've played here. But Aaron Boone has to take the hit. I'm sorry, because they're not going to fire the first base coach. They're not going to fire the pitching coach for what happened there on Friday night, or them only scoring 3 runs since the Friday night game. Because remember, they scored 12 in that game, and that was more than enough to win. And then they only scored 3 the rest of the weekend, so they're not going to fire the hitting coach either. To me, this falls squarely on Aaron Boone. And I know the Yankee fan has had it up to here with him, and I know that the Yankee fan wants him out. Mind you, he has 3 more years left on a contract. I didn't believe he signed a 3-year extension. So he's not going anywhere unless the Yankees do not make it to the postseason. And if that's the case, Brian Cashman, Hal Steinbrenner, if they don't fire him then, they need to get their heads examined, and they need to fire everybody and even send the owners packing. I understand you can't do that, but Hal has to, because if not, his father's going to probably rise from the dead, come back into the Yankee office and said, son, what the hell are you doing here? Because this team is just a complete disaster. They can't situational hit. It's all about the home run with this team. On top of that, they can't run the bases. They can't field half the time. And it is just a Keystone Cops comedy of errors. And you would think I'm happy about it as a Met fan. Yes, it's good to see, but I'm voicing my frustration, if you will, for the Yankee fan, because this is mind-boggling. You have to rub your eyes and say, what am I watching here? I mean, just a complete disaster. So to me, this was all on Aaron Boone. No surprise there. I'm not going out on a limb, despite the fact that there are other determining factors throughout. But as I said before, and one last time, before I move on to the Marlins, what he's done, and I'm only going by this year, by just letting things slide. Austin Wells, what happened there the other day. We could talk about all the base running blunders. But to me, he had a moment there where he could have sat Jazz Chisholm the rest of the game, and maybe even sat him there yesterday, despite the fact that they were desperate for a win. And even though he did hit a home run later in the game, but still. How are you going to set an example for the guys in that locker room if you're not going to discipline them or if you're not going to show who's boss? He's too buddy-buddy with these guys. And therefore, that's going to be his downfall when it's all said and done because he was unable to yank a guy by the jersey or tell the guy to come over here and say, sit your ass down, you're done for the game. But I can talk, that's a podcast unto itself, but I'll move on. As far as the Marlins go, I mean, what can you say about this team? Where does this come from? And to think, I know the Yankees have played in Miami over the years, but not to the tune of over 101,000 fans over the weekend as you saw. I don't recall those games having sellouts. Yeah, maybe they've sold more tickets because they know that the Yankee fan is going to invade that building over a 3-game series. But this weekend, for whatever the reason, and granted that the Marlins have played well, they've now won 6 consecutive series, obviously sweeping the Yanks, big crowds, big games, big performances. And here's the more even mind-boggling stat about this team. They are now currently 500. 55 and 55, and it's early August. Now, whether or not they're in the mix of the wild card race, I'll get to that in a moment. But think about this. Since June 13th, do you know what the Marlin record is? All right, you probably say, JAYREELZ, I don't know what. They're probably 44 games, that is. If you add it up, they got to be, what, 24 and 20? 25 and 19 maybe at best? They are 30 and 14. The Marlins. Can you believe this? I can't remember any stretch other than them winning the World Series in 97 and 2003 where they've had a stretch like this. I remember, I believe in 2016 or 17, they had a stretch to where they were in the middle of August and it was 66 and 63. And for them to be in a race that deep in the season was a shock. But then, of course, at that point, they started to unravel and they fell out of it, which was expected. And I think we could probably expect that now. But the crazy thing is about this run is that when you put it together, it's like, other than Kyle Stowers, how are they doing this? Stowers is a legit major league star. I mean, the guy has, 25 home runs. He's pretty much the only threat in that lineup. I mean, you have guys like Agustin Ramirez, who has power, as you saw there on Saturday. Otto Lopez, all right, he could be dangerous, but you're not going to be shaking in your boots. Xavier Edwards, scrappy player, good leadoff hitter, no power whatsoever. I mean, this is a team that's comprised of, let's face it, either AAA, 4A, or just young players getting their feet wet. And the manager, Clayton McCullough, who came from the Dodgers, you got to give them all the credit in the world for what they've done here. And their pitching has been very good. They got Yuri Perez back, who pitched there on Friday night. Edward Cabrera, who has really turned his fortunes around first couple of years with some growing pains, and now he's pitched well. Of course, how can you forget Sandy Alcantara, a guy who's had a down year for him. His ERA is ballooned to almost 7, but he's pitched well recently, and who knows, maybe he could carry this team a little bit down the stretch and maybe be a part of this wild card situation. But this team, you can't even pick them out of the lineup. And here they are at 55 and 55, and they have a very interesting week ahead because they have the Astros coming into their building after getting swept by the Red Sox. And on top of all that, they had to go to Atlanta, which Atlanta's killed them over the last half decade, although they played better against them this year. And I believe that series starting on Thursday is the beginning of a 5-game series because they have to make up a game from a rainout in Atlanta early this year. So they're going to have 8 games over the next 7 days, including 5 in Atlanta, a place where they've not played well. So I'll be curious to see a week from now where they stand in the National League wildcard race. Because as of right this very moment, and as I've talked about here over the last few weeks, I can't take a team seriously. All right, if you're a game or 2 under 500 in the AL wildcard race and you're 3 games back, I guess I have to consider you as a team that is a fringe wildcard team. But in the National League, that is not the case. But here they are. And the Marlins have reached 500. But they are currently 6 games back of the Padres, and they still have to leapfrog over the Giants and Reds in the process. Now, that's a lot of ground to make up, and they've already played the Padres this year, so it's not as if they're going to have a shot to maybe see them again, to maybe sweep them and inch closer to the wild card race. But the Marlins, I have to put them in there. They're tied with the Giants currently, 2 games behind the Reds in the National League wildcard race. But again, this is a telling week for this team because now that they've gotten to this point, they got to continue to move forward. There's no time to take the pedal off the metal. And with the Astros, I'm sure they're going to be angry knowing that they had a rough weekend in Boston and then have to go to Atlanta for a big series for them in Atlanta you can forget about. They are out to sea. Let's see where they stand a week from today as we'll discuss it. And even, of course, on Thursday's podcast to see how they fare against the Astros. So what a weekend for the Marlins, though, and what a time for them to rise to the occasion in a series where the big bad Yankees came to town. So those are the two big storylines there. Now, there's a few other things to discuss. I know the Astros had a rough weekend in Boston, as I mentioned, and you had that scenario there on Saturday where Hector Neris, the reliever, intentionally balked to get Trevor Story to third because he felt he was stealing signs. And after they recorded the third out, he and the third base coach, Kyle Hudson, were going at it where the benches cleared and the bullpens came out. No punches were thrown, but it was a rough weekend for the Astros, as I know they're up and down as well. Granted that they're at the top of the AL West, but they've had these scenarios where they've gotten swept. Remember, they got swept 4 games by the Athletics before the All-Star break, and now they get swept in Boston. Obviously, a much more respectable team. No offense to the Athletic fans, but weird with this Astro team. As great as they've done this year, and they've made some pickups, which I'll get to momentarily, but for the Astros, let's see how they, as they're going to play a hot Marlin team, if they'll continue to spiral out of control or will they get back on the beam as they head to South Beach. Well, outside of South Beach because they're playing more in Little Havana as opposed to right there on Biscayne Bay. Then you have a scenario, speaking of the Giants, they won 2 out of 3 over the Mets this weekend and they pasted them yesterday, even though the Mets did the same to them on Saturday. So they try to at least stay within, I'm not going to say striking distance, but hanging around in that wild card race there in the National League. And then you also had another weird game on Friday night. Let me just throw this out there. Now, nobody's going to remember the game because it was Pittsburgh versus Colorado, but it happened on the same night of that wild Yankee-Marlin game. But this one, you could even argue, was even wilder. Where the Pirates in the first inning scored 9 runs. There were 15-6 at the end of 5. No, going into the bottom of the 5th. They were up 16-10. And they were up 16-12 and going into the bottom of the ninth before they got walked off there by Brenton Doyle, hit a walk-off home run, and they won 17-16. Could you imagine? But nobody's going to remember because those two teams are long gone in the National League, where Yankees-Marlins, of course, Yankees, them being who they are, and the Marlins coming back the way they did, especially after the deficits that I mentioned. But as wild as that game was, nobody's going to remember it as being the game of the year, although not too many regular season games going to resonate unless you get into September and obviously impact the playoff races with a divisional or wild card. So you got to think about that as well. So you have that. You also have Blake Snell returning, as the Dodgers did win 2 out of 3, but his start lost. He gave up 2 home runs to Yandy Diaz, and they lost, I believe, 4-0 on Saturday. In fact, all the decisions were by shutouts. Dodgers 5-0 on Friday night, Rays 4-0 Saturday, and then the Dodgers won 3-0 yesterday. And in between, the Dodgers went 18 scoreless innings from Friday night to Sunday, around like this, the 6th inning, when they finally broke through. So the Dodgers were able to take 2 out of 3. And for Snell, in his return, he gave up those home runs, 5 hits, no walks, 8 strikeouts. So, and he did pitch 5 innings, did get the loss, but all right, can't take the home runs away, but it's not as if he pitched terrible. Could have pitched better. We know that Snell is a high-volume pitch count guy where he usually walks the ballpark. His control is all over the place, and he does strike out a ton of batters. But I guess if you're a Dodger fan, the one silver line you could take is that he didn't walk anybody, did strike out 8 batters in the 5 innings. But obviously the home runs and 5 hits is what doomed him as far as being on the winning side of this game. And then you had this, I didn't talk about this on Thursday, but you had this Speedway Classic in Bristol, Tennessee on Saturday, which was supposed to be a Saturday game and then a day off yesterday between the Braves and Reds, but you had just a downpour of a game where you barely got an inning in, and it had to be suspended and picked up yesterday. That was a Fox game, the highlight, and I believe they picked it up yesterday on Fox. Maybe it was FS1, who knows. But for baseball to try to experiment and do that, and it's unfortunate because they use that speedway as a diamond, and if you saw the first inning of that game, the infield was puddles everywhere, balls splashing in the outfield. Remember, this is not a major league ballpark where they have a draining system to where a lot of that water would be sucked from the turf and from the infield where you're not going to see that. And of course, they call the game there. Braves, Reds, they resumed yesterday where the Braves won 4-2. I know the Reds are in the wild card race, but the Braves long gone, so it's not a memorable game to say the least. I'm surprised they didn't play this maybe in Indianapolis because I believe that the Reds are their AAA team still in Indianapolis. I know it's been for many years dating back to the 80s, 90s, and maybe early 2000s, but they could have played it there. But for whatever reason, they played it in Bristol, Tennessee, and you didn't get the full effect of it when it was supposed to be aired on Saturday. So bit of a disaster there for Major League Baseball having a game on a speedway, which, all right, a little bit of a different scenario. It's not your Field of Dreams games, which, what happened there? Why can't they have that every year, a Field of Dreams game, to at least highlight baseball for one day? Whether it be, and I understand you have all these different matchups. They want to keep it with the rivalries. I know they did Yankees-White Sox. Well, that's not a rivalry game, but the two teams that have been around since the beginning of time. Then they did, I believe, Cardinals or Cubs-Reds one year, and since then they haven't gone back. So baseball, instead of having it at the Speedway, you could go to the cornfields in Iowa and have that game every year. So everybody can look forward to have that on Fox, and they've had it on a Thursday. Why not have it on a Saturday? Or why have it on a Saturday? Who knows? But anyway, that's the situation with baseball here over the last few days as far as the highlights are concerned. And then you have Marcus Stroman. He got released where Luis Hill now taking over his spot in the rotation. Stroman now a free agent. And obviously Stroman has not fared well as a Yankee. An ERA over 6, although his record was 3-2. But who knows where he's going to end up here to close out his season, if at all. But as we take a look at what's happening throughout the sport and, of course, the schedule as well, standings, the Blue Jays, who had a rough weekend against the Royals, they lost 2 out of 3 there. Now they go to Colorado, so who knows, maybe they could fatten up the division there, where now the Red Sox have overtaken the Yankees in the wild card, where the Yankees are now currently have the 5th spot and are a half game ahead of the Mariners in the wild card race, where you have the Texas Rangers, of course, losing 3 out of 4. And I talked about it on Thursday. In order for this to stick, or in order for any team to gain ground, where the Mariners did win 3 out of 4 against the Rangers, they have a 2-game lead over Texas as currently constituted, 3 games over the Guardians, and then 3.5 over the Royals, 5 over the Rays, and I'll keep it there. I know the Angels are 5.5 back, but the Angels are now 4 games under 500. So even though the Rays, who are currently 3 under 500, but they're 5 back, I'll keep them in the race for now. But who knows if they're going to continue to fall out of it. We'll see there in the coming days. But that is your wild card scenario with the American League. And as far as the AL overall, Blue Jays have a 3-game lead over the Red Sox, 4.5 over the Yankees, 4 in the loss, I might add. Then you have the Tigers, who lost 2 out of 3 in Philadelphia over the weekend, but have 7 in the loss, but an 8-game lead over the Guardians. They're going to be fine there. Astros, 2.5, but 3 in the loss over the Mariners. And let's see if the Mariners could build off of that 3 out of 4 over the Rangers. Rangers are 5 in the loss, but 4.5 back of the Astros, if you're curious. And as far as the National League goes, talked about the Mets now losing first place, half game behind the Phillies, as we know they won 2 out of 3 over the Tigers, and the Mets losing 2 out of 3 against the Giants. We know about with the Marlins. Marlins are actually, think about this, I know it's crazy. They're actually 7 games behind, 7.5 in the division, which I don't think they're going to even sniff. So just keep that in mind. And to think, actually the Marlins, they have a better road record than the Mets and the Phillies in the division. I mean, think about that. They're under 500 at home, but they're over 500 on the road, where the Mets are 6 games under on the road, and the Phillies are at 500 away from Citizens Bank. So just keep that in mind when they go to play the Braves over the weekend. And then you have the Brewers, 2 games over the Cubs in the division, where the Brewers swept the Nationals over the weekend, and then the Cubs obviously did not fare as well as the division rival Brewers did, where the Cubs did win 2 out of 3 against the Orioles over the weekend, but did not gain any ground, so they lost the game in the process. And then out west, you have the Dodgers with a 3-game lead over San Diego, and the Giants are 9 back. You can forget about them. So Padres trying to inch closer to the top of the NL West. And as far as the wild card goes, you have the Cubs with a 3-game lead over the Mets. But that could flip-flop if the Mets win and Phillies lose. The Phillies will then have the 5th spot. So that could change at the drop of a hat. But they are currently 3 games behind, 2.5 behind the Cubs for the top spot in the wild card. Padres are a game behind the Mets and have a 4-game lead over the Reds, 6 over the Giants and Marlins, as I mentioned. And I guess I'll throw the Cardinals in there. They're a game under 500, but 6.5 back. The wild card is going to be more interesting in the American League, as you know. Nationally, not so much, because unless the Reds have a surge in them, the Giants and even the Marlins, as I've talked about here ad infinitum, let's see if the National League wild card will be of any interest with those teams that are trying to fight and inch closer to the Padres, and even the Mets for that matter. Phillies too, you got to throw them in for the National League. And now as far as the schedule goes, before I move on to other things, schedule for this week, we know about a couple of series. Yankees playing the Rangers for 3, Houston at Miami, Minnesota at Detroit, San Francisco at Pittsburgh, Baltimore at Philly, Guardians are playing the Mets, KC at Boston, Milwaukee, Atlanta, Cincinnati at Chicago, Toronto, Colorado, as you know, Tampa, LA to play the Angels. And that's an interesting series to see if they could maybe even overtake us. What are they, 2.5 games behind the Tampa Bay, I believe, right now? I'll take a look at that. San Diego, Arizona, St. Louis at LA. Not a lot of good series here. I mean, you could look at it on paper. Oh, St. Louis, LA. Only because the Cardinals are 6.5 back. San Diego, Arizona division, but Arizona's pretty much toast for this year. You could say New York, Texas, Milwaukee and Atlanta, Cincinnati, Chicago, because Cincinnati and Chicago in the division, and not a lot of sex appeal with any of these series, if you ask me. So we will certainly, or I'll certainly be on top of it, and we will recap that come Thursday's podcast to see where these teams stand after these opening series this week. And I don't know about 4-game series. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick before I move it along. If any of these series are going to go 4 games. In fact, no. So that's what you have there. And as far as teams that I didn't, the Athletics are playing Washington, but nothing to Chicago, White Sox in Seattle. Yeah, that's what you have. Those are the only 2 series that are not playing tonight that are playing 3-game series into the week. All right, now let me put on my helmet and shoulder pads and talk a little football. No, I did not see any of the Hall of Fame speeches. I was actually at the time, and now they have it in the afternoon. Usually they had it in the late afternoon into the evening, but I guess they switched it. I did see Sterling Sharp on the dais, as well as another player. Now, I couldn't hear because they had the volume off, so I was unable to hear what they had to say. The other Hall of Famer that was up there, let me think real quick. I can't even recall. And I didn't watch any of the Hall of Fame ceremonies or what was said, etc. So I will just punt that and move on to, again, the soap opera that seems to never go away, and that's Micah Parsons and Jerry Jones. Micah Parsons put out a big statement, I believe on Twitter, where he said that, unfortunately, my days as a Cowboy are done. I want out. I feel disrespected. I'm paraphrasing there, but he did say that his days of a Cowboy have been numbered, that he wants to go elsewhere. And then Jerry Jones, of course, in impromptu press conference says, not so fast, that he's not going to trade Micah Parsons, that a deal will be done, so on and so forth. But here's my question to Jerry Jones. Why is he waiting till the last minute? Why does he do this? He did this last year with Dak Prescott, literally seconds before the start of the season in Cleveland when the Cowboys opened up their year against the Browns. or CeeDee Lamb late in camp. Just get this over with. I mean, what are we quibbling about here? I understand maybe Micah Parsons wants to make more than TJ Watt. But wow, if he makes a little less, is that something that they're going to lose sleep over? He's still going to get $1 zillion guaranteed. And if his ego or the agent's ego thinks that, well, he's better than TJ Watt, he's got to make more, blah, blah, blah. I mean, please. Micah Parsons hasn't won a Defensive Player of the Year, at least so I know. I know he's been in the running over these years. But come on, people. And let me make sure I get this right. Because the last few years, you had what? TJ Watt, you had Myles Garrett, NFL Defensive Player of the Year by year. Here we go. Yeah, the Aaron Donalds of the world. And just so I'm accurate, no, he has not. Here we go. From 2017 on, Aaron Donald, Stephon Gilmore, Aaron Donald, and when was Parsons drafted? 2019, 2020? Aaron Donald, TJ Watt, Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett, and Patrick Surtain. So yes, he is not won a Defensive Player of the Year. So how I look at it is that even if he makes $40 million, where I believe Garrett is making 40 and TJ is making 41, based on the numbers, 3 years, $123 million extension for TJ Watt. If he's making 40.5, is Micah Parsons going to lose sleep over that? He's going to get over $100 million guaranteed. He'll be all right. Yeah, people can say, well, JAYREELZ, you're not him. You're not his agent. You're not making that money. He's trying to get the bag, secure the bag as much as he can. $100 million is not securing the bag? Seriously? It's not as if he's going to walk out with $50 million guaranteed, or he's going to get paid 20 some odd million a year. He's going to be fine. So I don't want to hear that, oh, well, JAYREELZ, who are you to say what he should make, or who are you to say that he shouldn't get the most dollars or whatever? Last I checked, $40 million a year is more than enough to live on. And with the guaranteed money, he's good. So yeah, and I would think a lot of people behind me would feel the same way. So Jerry Jones, can we stop the nonsense and get this guy signed so we can move on? And the same can be said on a lesser degree for Terry McLaurin, and I get it. He feels disrespected when he sees guys like DK Metcalf, although via trade, but getting his money, as well as other wide receivers. And McLaurin, I don't think he's in that class. Is he a top 10 wide receiver in the sport? Do I have to go through the names right now? CeeDee Lamb and DK Metcalf and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Devontae Adams, probably not right now. And if he is, he's probably 9th or 10th as far as top receivers. Is McLaurin up there? Probably. And if you're Washington, I would just pay the man. Obviously, he's been on the team for several years. He's a big part of your offense with Jaden Daniels, and I understand you got Deebo Samuel, and you got the running back there, Brian Robinson, and I believe Zach Ertz, the tight end. So just bring McLaurin in, just rip up the contract and just give him a new one, and that's it. Case closed. So, and who knows, I don't know what their cap situation is, so I can't even go into that, but if you're the Commanders, your organization has finally lifted that cloud from Daniel Snyder. You have a franchise quarterback. Your team went to the NFC Championship game last year. The expectations this year are through the roof. A lot of people think that you're probably going to be the team this year to get back to a championship game and maybe, just maybe beyond. Because the NFC, although Philly in your division and Detroit is laying in the weeds, and who knows who's going to come out of the West or even the NFC South, but that team could be in the running to maybe get back to a championship game. Why screw up the bad juju in Commanders camp by not bringing this guy and signing him on the dotted line? That's how I look at it. I could see if you've had success over the years. I could see if it's a situation where he's continued to gripe about money, so on and so forth. What do you do? And that you've had a Super Bowl in your wall or in your locker room or in your facility when you walk on and you see that fourth Super Bowl to go along with the other three that you got there in the 80s and the early 90s, fine. But you haven't. And the last thing you want to do is have that bad karma and energy leave the building by having McLaurin sit out. And I get it's a business, and I get it that I'm sure he's going to be signed at some point, but why waste time? Get it over with. The drama will be gone. Have him sign, and away you go. Simple as that, right? Not for me, because I'm just a fan who watches from afar, but I would think, again, Jerry Jones, you've dragged this out in the past. Why are you going to drag it out with this player now where he wants out and you say that you're not going to trade him? Well, just sign him. That's it. Same can be said for McLaurin, and that is that. And you've had some other signings here that have transpired where Zach Allen, defensive lineman of Denver, gets his money, 4 to 102, $69.5 million guaranteed. So good for the Broncos, as they have a very good defense, as you know, led by Patrick Surtain, the reigning defensive player of the year. And then you have Zach Sealer from the Dolphins, the highest paid defensive player in the sports history, or in their team's history, I should say, as he signs a 3-year extension, almost $68 million. And then we do have a new, although interim, NFLPA Players Association, that is, executive director, and that is none other than David White. David White, who? Yes, I say the same deal, but remember, Lloyd Howell, who was doing some shady things behind the scenes with certain firms and strip clubs and limos and big bills and costly limo payments and God knows what else. So let's see if they could erase the stench of that and have White be the head of the Players Association and see how they fare from here on out, or at least for the time being. So that's what you have there. And one other thing I forgot to mention, and my bad there because I know I talked a lot of baseball, but real quick, and my apologies for not bringing this up, I did say that the 2 deals that surprised me at the deadline, I'm not going to go through all of them. Carlos Correa going back to Houston, only because, yes, there were rumblings, but I'm surprised that they reconnected. And Correa actually had a good weekend. He had 2 hits on Saturday, had a home run there yesterday, although albeit in losses. But Correa, I'm sure he's going to feel right at home. But I was a little bit surprised that they wanted to take on the rest of that money with injury history. He's 30 years of age. He's still young, but he has a lot of tread on that tires. And although that is a match made in heaven, and he always shows up in big games, which they're going to need come late September into October, let's see if he's able to do that again this year. But I was surprised to take on that money, and he's playing third base, not shortstop. Yes, I found that just a bit of a surprise that the Astros went that route, but so far so good, as he certainly produced here in the early going. And then the big surprise was Mason Miller. The A's fireballer, now in San Diego, had 1 outing, gave up a couple hits, struck out a batter. Looks like he's probably going to be an 8th inning guy to Josh Hader. All right, fine. But Miller, that guy he could throw through a brick wall. And that was, to me, the shocker of the deadline, him getting picked up by San Diego as they fortify that bullpen. And they also bring in J.P. Sears, a left-hander. So Padres looking stout there in the bullpen as they try to get not only back to a postseason, but get back to a championship game that they did, or series, I should say, 3 years ago against the Phillies, and see if they could go far. So my apologies for not talking about that in the baseball segment. So let me move on. As far as lacing up the high tops, let me do that as I get to the NBA right now, where you had a couple of extensions, the big one being Luka Doncic. And I know I didn't talk about him being fit, trim, and slim, as I'm sure you've seen everywhere here, Men's Health cover of the magazine and on the Today Show and all these appearances that he's made. And he looks fantastic and good for him. And the crazy thing is that he was a top 5 NBA player when he's not in shape. So it makes me think, now that he's in shape, could an MVP be in his future? Quite possibly, but with that extension, 3 years, $165 million, obviously nothing to sneeze at. But he went that route, which was very smart of him, because instead of signing which would have been, I believe, he could have signed after next year, or was it 27? Yeah, I think he had 2 more years left on his deal. So after that, he could have signed a 4-year, $222 million deal. He said, let me sign an extension now, because then after the 27-28 year, and who knows where he'll be as a player, will he have, an MVP under his belt, maybe even a championship for that matter, because he'll be set to sign an extension after the 28 season. Get ready. 5 years, $417 million. Yeah, you didn't miss any syllables, or wait, JAYREELZ, $417 million? Correct. Because remember, they signed the big deal, the TV deal with not only ESPN, ABC, Amazon, NBC, So the revenue from that, what was it, $76 billion over the next 11 years? Yes, which means the salary cap will go up, which will mean by the time we get to, I would think, 2030 and beyond, you're going to have an NBA player that's going to make $100 million a year. And for the Michael Jordans of the world, for the, you name it, even LeBron James, he's probably going to try to hang around to see if he can get $100 million, which obviously is not going to be the case. But yeah, you're going to have a $100 million a year NBA player before you know it. Cooper Flag, anybody? We shall see. But going back to Luka, signs that extension, wants to be remembered as one of the Laker greats, and we know what they've done this offseason, the DeAndre Aytons of the world, the Marcus Smarts, the Jake LaRavias, who, yeah, I know, it's big man that the Lakers need. And with LeBron, I'm sure you've seen the social media, him working out, 23rd year in the league, forthcoming, unbelievable. But in a loaded West, are the Lakers going to have enough to get to an NBA final? Way too early to tell. I just bring that up now because Luka, with everything that he said, and him probably being determined as ever to show the world that he is that top 5 player, I'm sure he's probably going to gun for an MVP this year. And I would think with any private discussions that he's going to have with LeBron, he says, listen, I know it's a team sport. You see how fit I've gotten. I want to wreck the league this year. I want to try to win an MVP. And I would think LeBron's going to do whatever it takes to say, hey, more off of my load to keep my knees and my legs and my health intact. Absolutely. So I'm sure he's going to try to dish him the ball left and right. LeBron, I'm sure, will have his moments. Will have to take over a game if need be. But whatever has been discussed between Luka and LeBron as of right this very moment and beyond, I'm sure he's going to take that to heart and have Luka just do what he can to take over the league and maybe win an MVP and see how far they could go this year. But again, the reigning champ and the Thunder are there. Denver with their makeover this offseason and trying to see if they could get another championship run with their leader, Nikola Jokic. You can't forget the likes of the Timberwolves with Anthony Edwards. I know they haven't really done much this offseason, but still. And you have your old mainstays, whether it be the Clippers, as they've tried to piecemeal it with older players on their team. And then, of course, you have the other teams that come up the rear, whether it be the Dallas Mavericks. Maybe they will have a surprising season. That obviously we'll have to wait how that plays out. And we know the West is loaded. Who knows what's going to happen with Memphis, as we know. But I would think as of right now, the Lakers, there still needs to be a little bit more in order for me to believe that they have a long, and health has to play a big factor, but it's way too early to tell whether or not this team is going to be on the verge of trying to make it to an NBA final. Teams that could be on the verge of an NBA final next year are the New York Knicks, and they re-signed one of theirs and one Mikal Bridges, and this was a no-brainer only because there was no way that he was going to be let go, and I believe he was an unrestricted or a restricted free agent, not unrestricted. Remember, they traded 5 first-round picks, including 4 unprotected first-round picks with the team on the other side of the Brooklyn Bridge, that being the Nets. So therefore, they had to re-up him 4 years, $150 million. Now, is he worth that kind of money? We know that that's going to be a market value for a guy that is, at best, third as far as the pecking order there, with Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns ahead of him. Now, the thing with Bridges, because the Knicks had to re-sign him based on this trade, you're not going to get consistent play from him, whether it's scoring, defense, etc., because as you've seen in this postseason, he floats in and out of these games. Yes, he's had moments in the fourth quarter where he puts up points in bunches, but then, yeah, he'll have a game going into the fourth quarter, he has 9 points. And I understand he's not a 25-point-per-game scorer. I understand that he's not a big-time offensive threat, and I get it that he's never been an all-star, he's never been an all-NBA guy, understood. But when you're making about what? Do the math. $37 million a year, you're going to need more than just 16 to 18 points, 6 to 8 rebounds, and maybe 4 to 6 assists a game. And I'm not trying to say that this guy has to be all world, he has to be lights out, he has to be a world beater, he has to be this, that, and the third. But if you're going to get paid that type of money, you got to be able to produce. And the thing is, you do not get consistent production out of a guy like Mikal Bridges. You don't. he's not a guy that's going to put up those type of numbers game in, game out. The back of his basketball card said so. And if you're a Knicks fan, of course, you're going to be happy he's on your team. But I tell you, knowing what he's going to make now, and this is more for April, May, and June. This isn't for October through the middle part of April. Because yes, he may have that big game against Cleveland, or he may have a big game against Boston, or maybe against OKC, he makes a big stop against SGA or Jalen Williams or whatever it may be. But nobody's going to remember that once you get to the postseason. Obviously, that's when the stakes are higher. That's where the money's on the line. And he had his moments last year. All right, he stopped Jason Tatum in game 2 while he tried to go to the basket and he threw the ball away. Okay, fine. And then another play, I believe, in game 1 where he stripped the ball. All right, fine. Kudos. Congrats. But you got to do more than that. And I understand, end of the game, delivered. Fantastic. But where was that against Indiana? When you had a 17-point lead midway through the fourth quarter. Where was his performance then? Where was him trying to slow down Tyrese Halliburton? Not that he's going to guard him, but you never know. Off switches, things of that nature, and he's big enough to guard him. He's 6'7". So, and I don't want to pick on Bridges. I know it sounds like I'm picking on him, but the thing is that when you sign a guy to that type of money and he doesn't really produce along the lines of what he's going to make, obviously that's where all the barbs come out, and a lot of that is in question. That is the only reason why I come up with that. So, Knicks fans, you got Bridges. Let's see how he's going to perform here when you get to next year as a key contributor to your team. And as far as the W goes, that being the WNBA, I know that the Minnesota Lynx, we talked about it last week, they beat the Liberty as they're going to face them 3 times here starting in a couple of weeks. Actually, that's a lie. Starting Sunday, where the Lynx will come to town, and then they'll play them in Minnesota the following weekend, and then a few days after that. So you're going to see a lot of the Lynx here come this Sunday, and I believe that's an ABC game, 12:30. Maybe they're doing a doubleheader for all I know. But you had the Lynx lose Napheesa Collier as she rolled her ankle. Who knows how long she's going to be out. That's a scenario where you're going to have to keep an eye on, because the Lynx, who lead the WNBA, there I go, NBA, who lead the W with records overall ahead of the Liberty in the standings, but they did get some reinforcements by means of the Dallas Wings as they traded for last year's most improved player, DeJounte Carrington, who I couldn't even tell you how she did last year for her to be that most improved player. As you know, I'm trying to at least pick up a little steam with the W, not because it's a slow time in the sports period, but based on what I said a couple of weeks ago when they had their All-Star break, and even my vlog that I put out about not embracing the WNBA and now getting a start to at least get the engine going. So at least I could give you a little bit, just a little of what to expect. And I get it. People say, oh, JAYREELZ, you're really going to go down that road? Why not? It's gotten a lot of attention, and it certainly has gotten buzz over the last year and a half. So yeah, I am jumping on the bandwagon a little bit, but it's not as if I'm watching WNBA games night in, night out. But anyway, as far as DeJounte Carrington, I'm sure with Collier out, maybe they just put her into the starting lineup, and let's see how they fare as the Lynx continue their best record assault on the rest of the league. And speaking of the Liberty, they also bring in a reinforcement in their own right with Emma Meesman. She won the 2019 Finals MVP as a member of the Mystics. And with Breanna Stewart-House, we talked about last week with that ankle or knee injury she suffered, a bone bruise, and not knowing how long she's going to be out. She didn't play in Friday night's loss to Connecticut, but they snapped their losing streak yesterday, 4 games, and a win yesterday where she contributed, I believe, had 11 points, 3 rebounds, and the teammates were just glowing over not only Meesman's performance, but professionalism and what she's going to add to the reigning champs. So that's a big move for them to see whether or not they won't miss a beat without Stewart in the lineup, and I know that's a tough shoes to fill there if you're Meesman, but she knows her way around the league. She's been around a long time, so let's see how she fares here. And then you had the Fever. Indiana winning 5 in a row, trying to get themselves in a position to get into the postseason. And remember, without Caitlin Clark, as she's still nursing, I believe, that groin injury. So give it up to the Fever. Without their best player, performing pretty well. And who knows when she'll be back. Hopefully she's back sooner than later as we get ready for this last month of regular season games before the playoffs begin next month. So you got that going on with the W, and then you've had a couple of incidents. I'm only bringing this up because it's terrible. It's a shame. It's awful. But as you know, I haven't followed the WNBA at all since its inception. And I get it when you have incidents of fans, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but throwing sex toys onto the court. I mean, seriously, is this what we're going to do? As if booing or dumping a beer or popcorn or whatever is bad enough. Now, booing is fine. You pay a ticket, you don't like what you see, you can boo. That you have a right to do. You shouldn't be cursing. Obviously, any type of epithets, racial or gender related, none of that should ever be said. You want to say, boo, go home, you suck, your team sucks, whatever, all right, fine. Anything after that, But sex toys? Is this what we're doing, people? And I believe one of the people that they caught, I believe arrested, and on top of that, may be suspended for a year or banned from attending any WNBA games, which is good. But I mean, when I read that, and not only happened once, it happened twice, fans are just out of line, unruly. I mean, is this what it's come down to, people? We can't even go to a game and then to see some fool throw something like that out there where you're just going to more so ridicule yourself as if you think you're ridiculing the women on the court or the women that are on the bench or the teams, their traveling coaches, trainers, etc. Like that's going to be something that you're going to laugh at, or they're going to look at that and be like, ha. I mean, I hate to end the podcast on that note, but come on. People, we got to do better overall. That is just a flat out disgrace. So to those two fans, you get what you deserve, and please, enough. I got nothing else to add. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books. As always, thank you so much for stopping by, carving precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the toy department of life called sports. And if you haven't done so, people, as I mentioned at the end of every podcast, please subscribe, rate, review, Apple, Spotify, the website, JAYREELZ.com, the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ, the little engine that could. I'm trying to keep pushing that channel, people, because I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. I'm currently at 680, so I still got 320 to go. So please, if you do your part to share this podcast, this channel in particular, to your loved ones, family, friends, foes, frenemies, whomever it may be that love content, sports content, lifestyle content, all type of content. And again, take a screenshot, send it to me on social media, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, or on Instagram at JAYREELZ, Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just a number. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, suggestion, you could do so at the following, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com, or the aforementioned social media accounts. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA, as I like to say, talking sports, it's birth. That's right. And I know I'm rocking the Jose Fernandez Rest in Peace shirt. If I didn't mention this at the top, or if I did, my apologies. I should have worn this shirt on Thursday's podcast because he would have turned 33 years of age on that day. And as we all know, the boating accident there in 2016 took his life way too soon. I understand there could have been some situations where he was under the influence. Terrible job on his part. But if that was the case, and it seemed to be the case, but still his life was lost, may he rest in peace wherever he may be. But I'm rocking it because in light of his birthday, and I guess with the Marlins streak, maybe, hey, some good vibes and good juju there for the baseball fan. But with that being said, where else are you going to get everything that I said in this podcast? Baseball, basketball, football, WNBA for that matter. Hockey's kind of quiet. Everything else is kind of low-key as well. In one podcast. Not many, if any, are doing it. Yours truly is. And as long as I'm sitting in front of this microphone and camera, I will continue to deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the The JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South End to the South Pacific and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.